All right, so let's get started building the units converter. First, we open Visual Studio, and then we select New Project. We're going to use the Windows Phone application template, and we're going to call it Units Converter. Before we get into actually building the code, let's look at what is in the solution by default from the template, because there's a number of pieces here as we start to build a real app that you will want to know about and you'll want to potentially change for every app that you build. First of all, if we open the Properties folder, we can first see the app manifest.xml, which is a file that's a holdover from desktop and web applet Silverlight. There's nothing in there that we need to change. The assemblyinfo.cs is the familiar file that allows you to put in your copyright information and your version information and so forth for your assemblies. And WM app manifest is the one that has most of the data in it that we care about as phone developers. And let's take a look at that. First, let's make sure that in the Tools options, we have the formatting set up as we did for XAML for XML. Go to Text Editor, XML, Formatting, and make sure Align Attributes on a separate line is set. And then we'll reformat this so that we can more easily see all the attributes. Edit, Advanced, Format Document. All right, this particular XML file is used not only by the build system and the phone emulator and the phone when you're building and testing your app. It's also used as part of the test for Marketplace application and the Marketplace certification and the Marketplace information that shows up for your app when your app is actually shipping. If we look down through it, first off, we have the product ID. This is a GUID, which is a unique identifier that identifies this particular app. If you ever decide that you want to take an app and clone it and start doing another app, this is the one thing that you have to change here, that product ID, so that the phone can uniquely identify that you have two different apps. Now here you've got the title of your app, the runtime type, Silverlight, don't ever change that. This version number, which is the version number that is shown in the Marketplace, you put in your name here, some description for your application, and the identification for your publisher here. If we look back over at the Solution Explorer, we'll see that there's 3 PNG files. ApplicationIcon.png is a 62 by 62 pixel image, which is the icon that shows up in the application list when you click the arrow on the right-hand side of the home screen to see the applications. Background.png is a 173 by 173 image, which is the same image but scaled up to go on the home screen so that when you pin your app icon to the home screen, it's large enough to see at a glance. And splash screen image, you've seen it many times as you've gone through and watched the movies so far. It's that full screen picture with the little iconic image of a clock on there. That's the default that are provided in the templates. You can either follow the train of thought that says this should look like the first screen of your application, but without all the controls active to sort of imply to the user your application is booting up. Or you can also use this for branding your application, have your company logo, have your app logo, and so forth on that particular screen. So in this icon path element here, it specifies which PNG is to be used for the application list. The capabilities list here is something that by default, the list you get from the templates includes almost everything that you're ever going to need for building an app. Before you submit to the Marketplace, you're going to want to delete everything here that you don't actually need. So for example, in our Units Converter app, we would most definitely delete the location, we delete the media library, we delete microphone capabilities our application doesn't need from the phone, because you know when you select an application from the Marketplace, it shows you what capabilities that app's going to use, and you don't want your user deciding not to use your app because it says it needs access to the appointments calendar when in fact it doesn't actually need that. Looking a little bit further down, we see the name of the starting page, which is in our case always mainpage.xaml. If you wanted to start with a different page, you would change this. And then finally, here's how background.png is referred to and the title that comes out underneath background.png when it's on the home screen. So we'll save that. References, this is standard Visual Studio references to assemblies that you need to build your app. In our case, for Units Converter, we don't need any additional assemblies. For some of the other apps that we're building, we'll be adding additional toolkits to that. App.xaml, as we mentioned in the introduction, is basic information about the application resources, which are shared amongst all your XAML pages, and also some lifetime information to describe which methods inside the app XAML CS are called for the events such as launching and closing and activated and deactivated. It contains all of these methods which are called in order to allow you to know how to handle interruptions such as a phone call or when the user hits the back button and exits your application, and throughout the whole full life cycle of the mobile app that Microsoft has specified for Windows Phone. And finally, there's mainpage.xaml, which we've seen in earlier movies, which contains the XAML and the designer for your user experience, as well as the mainpage.xaml.cs, which by default just contains your constructor. So let's close the code file and build the user interface for our Units Converter app. First thing we're going to do is to minimize the Solution Explorer so we have more room to see the XAML. We're going to shrink down the visual for the designer and open this up just a little bit so we can see more of what we're doing. And as we always do, we're going to click in the XAML and go Edit, Advanced, Format Document so we can see all the attributes. First step in building any app, which we're going to do as we always do, is change the name, Units Converter, and we're going to change the page title to Temperature. As we build this app, we're going to build it so first it just converts temperature, and then we're going to add some capability of settings so we can remember which kind of conversion we want to do, and then we'll add another conversion to do the conversion between teaspoons and tablespoons. Now, as we go through and build all these applications, we're using an external code snippet tool called Breevy. That's because while code snippets are available for you to create here in the Tools Code Snippets Manager inside Visual Studio, it's not easy to build them and to import them. So we're supplying all of the code snippets for premium subscribers in the exercise files, and I'll be going through all of the code. So if you don't have the code snippets, you'll be able to pause the movie and follow along. So in this case, we're going to start here where it says Content Panel, place additional content here. We're going to select all of that plus the commented out application bar and replace it with the user experience XAML for Units Converter. One other thing to remember when you're using Breevy, there's two modes. There's a mode that says paste in snippets as if you were typing them on the keyboard, and there's another mode that says paste them in as if they were pasted from the clipboard. Be sure to set Breevy up to be pasting from the clipboard because Visual Studio, as you're typing XAML, automatically adds quotes when you type the first quote, and if you try to paste in the snippet from Breevy, you end up with a whole bunch of extra quotes and the formatting isn't right. So first we'll select all this stuff and delete it, and then we'll get our first snippet in here. And now let's take a look at the XAML that we use to create this user interface. We'll scroll back up here to the content panel where we were before and go down through each one of the controls and take a look at it. So first we have a text box, which is, as you can see over here, this is the place where the user types in the first value to be converted, and it's called text box 1. And from the default, we did two things. We changed the value of the text attribute from being text box to being the empty string, and we added a event handler here for got focus and pointed it at value 1 got focus. When we get into the next movie and we look at what the code behind actually does, the purpose of this is so that when you tap either of the two text boxes, both text boxes get their value cleared so that when you type in Fahrenheit and start typing in a new number, the old Celsius value isn't shown, and more particularly because of the way the software keyboard works, when you tap in Celsius, the old Fahrenheit value isn't shown. Next up is this text block, which is where we put the Fahrenheit label. After that, we've got the second text box where you type in your value in Celsius. And again, as you can see, as we did with text box number 1, we've got a event handler here for got focus so that we can clear the values. And finally, we have text block for the Celsius label. Now, you might notice by looking over here at the designer, there's no button to say, how do I know when to convert? So what we did was we used the application bar in order to add a button to say, click on this button to convert, as you saw in the running demonstration of the app when we looked at it earlier. When you put things in the application bar, they're here, they show up in the emulator. They never show up in these 4 circles here, so never expect to actually see your icons in the designer. And if we look at the attributes that we've got here, you can see, first of all, that we have a click attribute. This is an event that says, what should I execute when the user taps the button? We're going to have a method called convert click. And then we also have URI for the image that we're going to show up there. And in a moment, I'm going to show you how we're going to go get that image from a collection of images that Microsoft gives you with the toolkit. And finally, there's the text attribute, which, as we saw, when you click on the ellipsis, the ... on the right-hand side of the application bar, and the application bar scrolls up, this is what's going to show up in that tiny text underneath the icon. There are some very specific rules on which kinds of URIs you can use for various things. At the end, we'll have a list of the Microsoft-specific requirements for different things, but one of the things you can remember right now is that for every image, you always need to have a leading slash, especially for things in the application bar. So let's go bring the image into our app so that when we run it, you actually see the two curved arrows icon at the bottom of the screen. So we're going to come back to the Solution Explorer, and as you see from the URI here where it says /images, it's expecting a folder. So we're going to right-click and add a new folder, call it Images, and then we're going to right-click here and say Add Existing Item. As I mentioned, Microsoft provides in the toolkit a collection of icons, so it's under Program Files, x86, Microsoft SDKs, Windows Phone, version 7.1, Icons. What I like to do is to take that folder and drag it right over here to my favorites because I'm going to access it over and over again. When I click on Icons, you're going to see three folders here. There's a dark folder, there's a light folder, and there's a vector folder. The dark folder and the light folder contain the same set of icons, but one of them is white on black and the other is black on white. While Microsoft provides both of those, here's a tip. Only use the ones from the dark folder in your application. The operating system will automatically switch to the light ones. If you're doing this and debugging on the phone itself, and you have your phone set to the light theme, you're thinking, maybe I should use the one from the light folder because that looks really great. That's great as long as the user never changes his phone or her phone to the dark theme, because as soon as they do, the icon disappears. So we're going to always use the ones from the dark folder. In the vector folder are all the Adobe Illustrator vector images there. So if you wanted to take these and customize them and build something of your very own, you could start with that and create your own dark or light icon. So we're going to come back to the dark folder. And as you can see, it's probably a little hard to see on a smaller screen, but each one of these things has an icon in it. But it's very dim trying to see it in the open file dialog here. But what we want to do is come down here and scroll down to where we get appbar.sync.rest.png, and we just click Add, and that comes over here and ends up in our solution. Now, that's not quite enough. In addition to bringing it in as Add Existing File, we also have to set the properties on it because the default properties is that it shows up as a resource. And for use with the application bar with Silverlight, it needs to be a content file. So we'll open up the Properties tab here by pressing F4 and come over here to Build Action, drop this down and select Content. And then you also have to set Copy to Output Directory. We'll drop this down and select Copy Always. And then we'll get rid of the Properties window. So now we have everything we need for our user interface. If we tried to build this right now, it wouldn't run because we don't have the code behind, but that's the topic of the next movie.